Hello and welcome back to my gaming channel thing. I don't know, this is just a really quick video, or per se, about more or less my thoughts on the PlayStation 1. Because at this point, the system's over 20 years old. It's actually 21 years old. I mean, to put that in retrospect, in 1970, let's say 1977, I think when Atari first came out, 1977, not 78. You know, think about it back then, and think about where Atari was in, 1998. 20 years later, it was non-existent. The brand was dead. People were like, Atari what? So to think that in perspective, that PlayStation has actually lasted 20 years. The only other thing that would supersede that would obviously be Nintendo and potentially Sega, though they bowed out of the hardware business, they're still in the software business. So as far as a brand itself, PlayStation and Nintendo are the only ones that have made it past the 20-year mark. Nintendo now just passed its 30-year mark. But the big, and the funny thing about, there's a funny thing about the PlayStation and the Nintendo is this was supposed to be the Super Nintendo PlayStation. So basically, Sony wanted more money. Nintendo wouldn't want to give it to them, so they basically, in layman's terms, said, fuck off, we'll make our own system. And we'll call it the PlayStation together instead of two separate names. After a short court battle, Sony won, and they basically came out with the PS1. This is which version is this? This is it's a 7501. It's definitely not the first one that came out. The first one, believe it or not, had... Yeah, there's my little Game Shark thing. The first one, believe it or not, right here would be the analog inputs. Like you would have stereo out, you would have your video out, and such like that there. So, but this still does have the serial output. This was made in December 1998. This is pretty much the last run they made with this I/O port. By 99, they got rid of that port, more or less because I had no use for it, and people were taking advantage of it, pirating games with it were very big back in the day. Standard cord. So, I mean, here's a tip. For anybody that's goes on eBay, don't be fooled by saying this will work with a PlayStation 1. That's absolute horse shit. You could take a generic one of these and it'll work just fine. There was no specific made one for this version of the PlayStation 1. I do not have the smaller version of the PlayStation 1, so that one is specifically made for it. But this one, if they say, oh, cord for PlayStation 1, don't worry, just fuck off with it. Go to Best Buy, you can pick it up for a few bucks, unless you really want to save that $3. Just go to Best Buy and pick up the, God, I can't even think of the polarized cord, and you shouldn't have any issues with it. But aside from that, this was it. This was the PlayStation 1, and like I said, the serial port made it so that you can use... So basically, you could use these little Goldfinger things. And, of course, Game Shark. Oh shit, just dropped something. My memory card. Yeah, so I mean, that's another thing. Memory cards. If you didn't have one of these, you were pretty much up shit's creek, as far as that were to go. So, memory cards. Very, very important. Now, funny story about this memory card. It's the main reason I brought it out. I bought this, as an aftermarket. I do have the original ones, but this was around the time where I got in the PS2, and I just needed another PlayStation 1 memory card. So, naturally, what did I do? I just went out and bought a cheapo. The funny thing is, this card actually stopped working in all my PlayStation 1s, but worked absolutely fine in my PlayStation 2. I don't know what happened. I can play PlayStation 1 games on my PS2, put up saves, do have not, but I put this in a PS1 and a PS1 will not recognize it. I don't know if it's an aftermarket thing or if there was something that it just, for whatever reason, formatted the PS2. Now, I did think, that's the other reason why I got both of these out, I did think that, it had something to do with my PlayStation 1. So I tried it on both of them. Didn't work. Still didn't work. So I don't know what happened. If you guys in internet land can tell me if there's anything that happened like that, and believe it or not, these official Sony ones started doing the same shit. I don't know what it is or if it's the system, but I have some of these Sony cards now that, and this just recently happened, that now only work in a PlayStation 2 and not a PlayStation 1. It's bizarre. Or, vice versa, or they won't work in the PlayStation 2 and they'll work in the PlayStation 1. So if you guys have any idea of why the hell that is, tell me in the comments, because that would be very interesting for me to note. Let's see. Yeah, this is the last PlayStation 1 model that they made that was this size. There might have been one more production run of these, but this is the last one they made of this size. And the biggest difference is they pretty much have it stripped down. I mean, aside from those that went away a long time ago, the I/O pillar is gone. And even, I've actually opened this thing up, even on the motherboard, they don't even have, you know, the pin connectors. Like, typically you would see that they wouldn't redesign the motherboard, they would just pull it out and you would still see where you could potentially put a solder point on. That was also stripped out of there. So they pretty much took this bare bones down, and this was, yeah, December '99. So this was the last production run of this model, because very shortly thereafter that, I want to say in late, it was September. It was September of 2000 that they came out with the mini PS1. So I believe this was one of the last production runs. There might have been one made in May before they decided to change it over, but I'm pretty sure '99 is when they stopped producing these gray box models. It's not that there was anything wrong. And there's the other thing. There's my Game Shark disc, because you need that in order to cheat with it. So I had to have this and that and the other thing. As far as that were to go, like I said, PlayStation 1 is fairly cheap to collect for. But it's almost a double-edged sword, and I'll say that with this very reasoning. You can get a PlayStation 1 pretty much complete on eBay, Amazon, for if you're looking for the system. If you've never bought one, you're like, I want one, and you're looking for specifically one of these systems, or even the smaller ones, you get it complete with even a couple of games and a memory card thrown in for easily $30. You know, here's a double-edged sword of that. If you're want it for literally $10 more, most people are selling PlayStation 2s with memory cards and games. So, I mean, to each his own. The biggest difference, they both play PlayStation 1 games. The biggest difference is you might have to hunt down the memory cards. And the best way to get some of these memory cards is they're $3-4 on eBay, but typically a lot of people sell these things in lots. You can get probably 2 or 3 of them for like under $10. So I mean, but you definitely need that. So if you're looking to collect, you would need to pick up one of these. There is kind of a bad rap about these gray PlayStation 1s. Now, depending on which model you buy, the models that I have here you can obviously see where the laser's positioned. Now, originally, they made these with cheap parts that would wear out over time. This tends to wear out. You can find these parts on eBay fairly cheap, but these tends to wear out. The biggest problem that you see overall, especially for the older ones. Now, if you're going on eBay and you're buying some of these, and you see this is actually over here, be very, very careful if you're buying them, especially, I believe they're the ones that were made from about 97 back. Because if you see this over here, because not only were they using cheap parts, but there was also something with, because the power supply is actually up here in the corner, it had something to do with where the power supply was actually interfering with the laser, or it made the laser wear out further. Just the electronic interference, whatever the fuck that is. I can't say that word. But you got to be very careful when you get those ones, because they very well may work, but it's hard to say for how long. This particular system has started giving me troubles over the past, I'll say 10 years. I don't play it that often. It makes a noise that I don't like. It's almost like it seems like it's struggling to read the discs. If you ever heard people say stories where they're going like this, flipping it upside down to play it, it's because those parts were worn out. Pretty much, this is the original OG when it comes to PlayStation, the original box there. But highly advise picking it up. I'll talk about some games and all that later as far as that were to go, and the greatest hits and non-greatest hits bullshit that they had us go through. But as far as that were to go, that is the PlayStation 1 in a nutshell. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.